Summer is over, fall has come, and on my big Trident the leaves are starting to drop. So it is time to take a look at how the development of this Trident maple has continued over summer. I'll show you what it did in early spring and compare the result with the tree right now. Now, if you also have a Trident maple, this is the earliest stage in which I start removing the leaves. I prefer to let the leaves drop by itself, but as you can tell, the leaves are almost dropping by themselves except for here at the tips. Let's get started. Let's get all these leaves off. So when we started the season, I first let all the branches just grow for a couple of weeks. And I did that because then, by letting the branches grow, the roots will also grow. And with that, you activate the roots, they start growing, they start pumping nutrients and water. And only once the first flush of growth has grown, that is when I start working on it. And what I did, I removed all the leaves. And when I say all the leaves, I mean all the leaves. All the inner leaves, all the outer leaves. And I trimmed back all the long branches. I just created a new profile. Now, when a tree is young, like this one, well, actually it's not a young tree. In development as a bonsai it is young. It is important to make sure that the lower branches also grow a lot. So what I did, I wired the tips of the lower branches up, and I trimmed back the tips of the upper branches. That way the lower branches relatively get stronger than the upper branches. You can see that as well here, the branches at the lowest part of the trunk, they are substantially thicker than the ones on the upper ones. Now if you do that over summer, you'll see that also the upper branches start shooting. What I did in the middle of summer, I just trimmed the profile of the upper branches and the lower branches I left in place. So this is the growth of a full season, whereas here you only have the growth of a few weeks of the season. Here you can still see the pruning sites where I pruned back in summer. This way you get very fine branching in the top of the canopy, whereas the lower branches can still extend. When I pruned in early spring, I also looked at places like this, and you had big clusters of all these little side branches that were all coming off in one spot. That's ugly because you get little knobs. And I removed that as well, carefully closing the wounds with cut paste. Then I trimmed the leader of the trunk. It was getting quite thick in comparison to the rest, but now that it is fall again, I'm wondering whether I should have cut it back. Because you can see here, the transition from the thick into the thinner trunk here is quite drastic, and that is because there's a lot of cuts here that I had to clean up. And maybe this year I'm not going to cut all of this off. I might just leave a little bit here so that next year it will grow a little bit faster. But what we do see is lots of nice little side branches here with which later on to establish a new leader. What I very much like with this tree here is I removed half of a big bulb that was growing out. This big lump I carved out here, and you can tell this has almost completely closed. There's a little... But what I can do in springtime, and what I probably will do in springtime, is carve this out as well. And that way the wound will just be here in the middle and will close over quite quickly. But yeah, quite happy with how this is developing. Now let's have a look at these cut sites where I removed the old bark, and let's take a look at what they look now. Let's take off the cut paste and look underneath the cut paste. I carved out the connection from the main trunk and just had a side branch grow out, and you can see that the cut has almost completely closed over. This is a very nice result, and by the end of spring next year it will completely have closed over. Same here. This is a cut that has closed over completely over the summer. And in the back of this tree, as discussed before, there's a lot of cuts that need to close. I opened up the edges of the bark to do that in spring. You see that new callus has pushed up the cut paste. Very good developments here. What I'm now going to do for the rest of the year, this is going to be pruned back. I'm going to take away all these long branches. I'm going to cut back to all the short extensions here. That makes natural taper in the trunk line and in the branches, because that's what I want. I want taper also in the branches. That will make a tree look much older and much more mature. I'm not going to focus on extending into a canopy shape. I'm just going to bring it all the way back to almost the point where it was last year. And next year I can do exactly the same thing as this year. Always keep an eye out on the internode length when you're developing a maple. What you can see here, this was a side branch that was growing slowly, and there's a node there, there's a node there, there's a node there. Here it started growing this year, and at some point I clipped the main branch. You see there's a node there, a node there. From here to here and here to there, the internode length has doubled. It does it again here. And here still it is increasing. Now we're getting towards fall and there's slow growth again. So deciding how much I'm going to keep, I can keep it here, but then all of this will not grow a bud again. If I cut here, I get dieback all the way to these buds. If I cut here, then I have this long internode. And here's a very short internode, and actually I would like to keep that as my main distance. So I'm going to go just above these buds. Taper development. When defoliating in spring, it becomes very clear that there are branches like this small one here that are growing very clear near the base of the branches. And I remove all of these to avoid big swellings at the attachment of the trunk. I do the same thing now. I try to go through all the branches and I say, well, if there's too many buds at a branch or there is double buds, I remove one of these so that they don't clutter up the whole tree. Ramification is good, but it needs to be in the right spots, otherwise it just leads to lumps and clumps. So now I'm just going to go through the whole tree and remove all these extra branches that are in it. In a way simplifying it, removing ramification. But long term, this leads to better trees. Now in springtime I'm going to take it out of this pot again. I'm going to repot it and work on the roots. Yes, I did the same thing last winter, but this is a very vigorous tree. It will have created lots of roots. And part of developing a new bonsai is also developing the nebari. So it is important to very frequently take the tree out of the pot, look at the roots, refine the roots, lay them out nicely, trim them back and repot it. That way you will develop a much better root base than you had originally. pruning all done. Now it's a matter of just getting rid of all the old leaves, cleaning up the surface, and then giving it a bit of a winter oil spray. Ready for winter, and in springtime we'll look again at the repot and the roots. Thank you for watching, enjoy winter, keep growing bonsai!